We had a slight interruption on the video, and so I'm making this in two parts. This is part two. And we left off with the accusers reminding the king that Daniel, this exile from Judah, paying no attention to what the king has decreed, and he's still praying 3 when the king every effort until sundown to save him. King's in a tight spot. No one could change, not even the king. So now the king is scratching his head. There must be a loophole. There got to be some way that I can save Daniel, because there's got to be a way out. And while he's pondering, verse 15, then the men went as a group to King Darius and said to him, "Remember, your majesty, that according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, no decree or edict that the king has issued hold no wiggle room for the king. He made a decree, he signed it, and now it is set in stone." Verse 16. So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continuously," notice that King Darius recognized that God, the God of Daniel, would save him. That shows you the kind of faith that the king had in Daniel's God. He said, "I'm going to throw you in here. I can't help myself. But I know that your God can deliver you." How about that? So here we have a pagan king who has been trapped and throwing Daniel in the lion's den. So he knows deep in his heart that all is not lost, that Daniel has a life-saving God watching over him. Verse 17, a stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the lion and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. Then the king returned to the palace and spent the night without eating, without any entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. King is troubled. King has realized he's been tricked, but there's nothing he can do. He has condemned Daniel to the lion's den, but in the same breath, he recognizes that God can save him. And you see from this one verse, verse 18, the king is really troubled. This really, really bothers him. So now we're looking at the heart of the king. You see, God has dealing with people who mistreat his own. God will give them no rest when they know that they have done something wrong. Well, let's see what happens next. Verse 9. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice. So think of something. Daniel's been thrown in the lion's den. The lions have been known to do nasty things to people. But he goes there and calls out that God was going to intervene. Continue. Call to Daniel in an anguished voice, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God whom you been able to rescue you from the lions? Guess what? The king is expecting an answer. This is kind of a rhetorical question, really, if you just stretch a point. The king has heard from the past the miraculous things that God has done in the life of Daniel. So really, the king is expecting the God of Daniel to rescue him. Verse 21, Daniel answers, may the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouth of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight, God's sight, nor have I done any wrong before you, your majesty. There it is. Simple statement. I'm innocent. And God has vindicated me by shutting up the mouths of the lions. I'm here. Just like you thought, King. And my God was going to save me, and he did. God will always rescue you when things seem like you come to the end of the line, at the bottom of the barrel, back to the wall, between a rock and a hard place. God is still with you. Verse 23, the king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. When Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him. And this is an important part of that verse. Because he had trusted in his God. His faith saved him. Think about that. His faith saved him. Now, what about you and I? If we're Christians, what saved us? Our faith. Our faith. Because we believe in a living God. We don't have. We know that things will go well with our soul. Verse 24. At the king's command, the men who had falsely accused him, Daniel, was brought in, thrown into the lion's den along with their wives and children. And before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. Boy, you talking about payback. Not only was all these people who had falsely accused, yeah, what they said was correct. Daniel was praying, but it was their motive and their devious way of operating with the situation. And they wanted to make something to their advantage, get rid of Daniel, and then they would rise up and take his place. It worked that way. So not only did these men pay with their lives, but with the lives of their wives. Resentment comes with a high price tag. Verse 25. Then King Darius wrote to all the nations and people of every language in all the earth, may you prosper greatly. I decree. Now remember, when the king makes a decree, everybody pays attention and everybody follows because there's a penalty when the king decrees something and you don't follow through. I shall decree that in every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed, his dominion will never end. He rescues and saves, he performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lion. Notice the king recognizes who God is, and God is capable of doing great things. And God's kingdom, unlike the kingdom of Babylon and the Medes and the Persians, God's kingdom endures forever. And the king recognizes this. Now, a lot of people want to write off this idea of God. Oh, he's just somebody, he's a myth. You just throw him out there just to have something to believe in. You need a crutch. They don't really mean that. They are faced with something they can't explain. Just try to write it off. But God is here forever. And one day they will find out that there is a God. Remember the psalmist, only a fool says there is no God. Well, these accusers found out about God. They found out the hard way. And when they come up against a man of God, someone who honors God and is willing to put their life on the line, that they have picked the wrong person to try to destroy, they wound up being destroyed. Final verse, and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Go back to chapter 1. Remember the last verse told us that Daniel lived until the reign of Cyrus. Daniel's an old man now. Oh, some say he's in his 90s. I don't know. But he's gone from a young, that's what God will do for you. He'll take you from being nobody to being somebody that everybody recognizes. This story is really more than just Daniel being thrown into the lion's den. It's a constant reminder that when you are faithful to God,